Hey everyone. So yesterday was a very interesting day, and so had some experiences and just wanted to share some of those thoughts and reflections about yesterday, past few months, and perhaps about some projections about where we can go from here. So from the title of the video, you guys know I'm specifically talking about the election, and to be transparent, I voted for Trump. I wouldn't consider myself a Republican, but I wouldn't be offended if I was called that. I can get into labeling and political labeling and what I value maybe in another video, but just wanted to be transparent about that. Many of my friends are Democrats, and many of them are also Republican. And when I say that, again, with the labels, I could also just use personality traits. And so when I say Democrats, I mean people who are typically more compassionate. They are more empathetic and sympathetic to the working class, supposedly, and the poor. And I'll get into some of those, why I just said supposedly. They're more open to ideas. They're more embracing of novelty, and they're not necessarily as constrained or reliant upon tradition as other people. And when I'm talking about my conservative friends, I really am referring to people who are more traditional. They're more religious, typically. They're more conscientious, they're more polite, and they're more orderly and duty bound. So I'm going to use the political terms, but just know that I'm also referring to patterns of perception and behavior from a personality standpoint. So what's the best way to go about talking about this? I'll just list 3 experiences that I had yesterday, talking particularly to my Democratic friends that just made me worry, that were very interesting, I'll say. So I'm having a conversation with them about the election results, about Trump winning, and we started discussing why did he win. And from my perspective, I think that our culture and our political landscape would be great if we had a culture of productive dialogue where both parties can talk across the aisle and we can handle bipartisan issues and we can make progress for all American citizens regardless of who's in power. And so that's the goal that I have in mind. And when I'm talking to my friends, my more liberal friends, what I'm hearing is, okay, we have to re-strategize to figure out how to beat the Republicans. And I understand that, but part of me was thinking, if your goal moving forward over the next few years is strategizing and planning out how to beat the Republicans, I feel like you're missing the point. I feel like your goal should be to figure out how to tap back into the American people. If we are going to accept the election and accept the votes, most of the voters, we can just say and simplify, the American people, their values align more with the values of what might be beginning to be called the new Republican Party, of Trump, of Elon, of Vivek and Tulsi and RFK. And we can get into what some of those values are. But I was kind of taken aback talking to my liberal friends when they were, their mind, they were also grieving, and I understand to an extent, but their mindset was focused on winning and not pursuing the truth, or not changing their principles or their values, or soul searching and reassessing, okay, why exactly did we lose? Or they were assessing why they lost, but from my perspective, their conclusions will lead to poor strategizing moving forward. And so from my perspective, I felt like there's already a disconnect where they were viewing this election from the lens of, dang, we lost, now we got to figure out how to beat the Republicans again. Not, oh, we lost, okay, let's figure out where our values are, how our values are disconnected from the American people, because the goal isn't necessarily to beat the Republicans, it's to do what's best for the American people. So there are 3 specific conversation topics that I kind of picked up on with them. And so one of the reasons they thought that they lost is because of racism, sexism, and other types of bigotry. And my response to that was, there's no doubt that some of that exists. There's no doubt that there are some voters who did not want to vote for Kamala because she's black, or did not want to vote for her because she's a woman. No doubt that racist, evil people and sexist, evil people exist, and some of those people voted. And some of those people, that was their primary means of voting. One question becomes, to what extent did that play a factor in the election? And I don't know, but what I do know is that I think part of the reason that the Democrats lost is because of the push of identity politics, and then more specifically from Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, the push for common enemy identity politics rather than common unity identity politics. And so this constant emphasis on race and sex and what Martin Luther King Jr. called the accidents of our birth, I don't think people like that. I think people are tired of it. I think they're tired of being boxed into various categories that are very real, and there are very real differences between people that matter. But I think that the way the Democrats were going about implementing policies and their rhetorical points on identity politics, I think that really turned a lot of the American people off. And I think if one of the conclusions that you draw from the feedback from the American people from the loss of the election is that, well, we lost because of racism and sexism, I feel that the next logical step would be to just increase common enemy identity politics and continue talking about how we have to fix past discrimination by using present discrimination, and fix present discrimination by using future discrimination. And I think people are sick of that. And so I don't think that's a wise interpretation to adopt when analyzing why you lost the election. Okay, another talking point that came up. So on the first assassination attempt on President Trump, we saw the iconic picture after he took the bullet and got up and said, "Fight, fight." I don't exactly remember how my liberal friends and I got on that topic, but they analyzed that with some sort of hyper intellectualization or rationalization. They were like, what does that even mean? Fight, fight. I don't understand. Like, why is that such an iconic picture? And it was like I felt this disdain or kind of hubris, I would say, in their voice as they're saying, like, what does that even mean? I don't understand. So I did 4 years in the Marine Corps, and I also think it's just a part of my personality temperament. As a leader, there's nothing more inspiring, almost, that you could do for your people than to take charge of something that is very difficult and face it voluntarily and assert yourself either physically or metaphorically or psychologically, and confronting whatever that obstacle is in front of you. And so, physically, literally, Trump took the bullet, and he could have had multiple responses, but his response after getting his shoes was to, fight, was to let his people know that he was okay, and let his people know that, this will not stop him. That was a dramatic, I would almost say, archetypal image. Like that was a cultural, that was something that tapped deep into the collective unconscious, because in that image, if you can imagine in your mind, we get to see this man's character literally under fire. And it's interesting to me that some people can't understand why that was an iconic and why that is an iconic American moment. And then you listen to Mark Zuckerberg saying, I mean, that's pretty badass. It's like, it doesn't take much human experience to understand that is something that's badass. And again, I listen to my liberal friends and I can't help but feel this sort of elitism, this sort of like, I think that it's telling that they didn't understand the importance and the significance of that. So that's kind of another area of disconnect that I feel like they had. And then the last thing that I'll say in this conversation that I had with them, we started discussing the impacts of legacy media versus independent media. So I love independent media. I listen to Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Trigonometry, many podcasts, and one of the things that we did agree on is that there's so much information out there. And so how do you filter in the information to get trustworthy information? It's not necessarily objective or unbiased, because that's impossible. And no one can be objective, no one can be unbiased. But the thing that I want in my sources of information is someone that I can trust. And if they make a mistake, they're gonna admit it. When they are trying to gather data, or they're talking about, how they came to a conclusion about a certain story, they will be transparent and lay out, okay, I went to this source and I looked at this information and I accepted it, and then I deduced from that this other claim, and then it's up to me to make that decision. And so we had some agreement about that, I would say, at least with a few of them. But Trump went on many independent media platforms. He went on Lex Fridman, he went on Joe Rogan, he went on the one with Andrew Schultz, many different comedians, Theo Vaughn, and I think that played a major role. But some of my liberal friends just said, oh, well, they're all right wing, and they all just gave him softball questions. And look, to the first point, no, that just shows you that they don't watch those people and they don't listen to them. And so, and from what I can tell, more Americans are listening to independent media than legacy media. So now it's another area of disconnect where you're missing out on this large proliferation of information. But to the second point, I don't know if I can give a opinion about whether or not the questions were softball or hardball. Joe Rogan should have pressed him more. I watched the Kamala Harris and Fox interview. Like, should Joe Rogan and Lex and Andrew Schultz, like, should they have been like that Fox News journalist and how he was to Kamala? I don't know. I wanted a conversation. I wanted to know who is Trump, and I felt like I got that. And I think I also wanted it from Kamala, because I wanted to hear like who she is or who she was, and I tried my best to listen to some speeches that she gave, and I think she went on to one podcast, but it felt like I still just had that persona that I was hearing. And with Trump, maybe he's someone who can do it, but I can't imagine that he can maintain a persona for more than 3 hours. There's some genuineness of your actual character that's going to leak out, at least in my opinion. Anyway, I think the fact that many of my liberal friends just cast aside all of the independent media platforms as right wing, or as somehow being for Trump, and then acknowledging, well, the people who listen to independent media or listen to those podcasts, they only listen to them because they're confirming their own bias. I don't think that's the right lesson to learn from this election. I don't think that's the correct interpretation to drive strategy change if you want to realign yourself with the American people. And that could be the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal could be to realign yourself with the American people, and then the sub goal could be beating the Republicans. Cool, that's great. I think that's fine. There's supposed to be a tension between the Democrats and the Republicans, because we don't know what the right answer is going to be with all these various complex topics that we're dealing with. And remember earlier I mentioned the personality differences. Sometimes you need new ideas, and sometimes you need to maintain what's been working. And we don't always know what's going to be right, and so we have to have productive dialogue. But these instances, these three experiences that I had, these three talking points, indicated to me that, at least from this small, sample size of my few friends, like, they're not willing to make that change. They're not willing to pursue those values or the adaptation and the learning that is needed to realign themselves with the American people. And so just wanted to get that out there. Again, I believe that a productive dialogue is needed, and mindsets that stem from these sorts of examples that I was just talking about, I don't think that's going to be helpful. Now, on social media, I'm also seeing a whole bunch of people vilifying those who voted for Trump, and I don't think that's going to be helpful either. You have to live with the other half of the country. You have to coexist with them, and it can't be that everyone who voted for Trump is stupid and evil. Are there some people who voted for Trump that are stupid and evil? Yes, absolutely, because there's stupid and evil people everywhere, and everyone has an element of stupidity and lack of wisdom and malevolence. but there's not too much you can do about that if that's the prime motivating reason for half of the people to have decided the way that they decided. So, talked a lot about Democrats. Now, Republicans, I'm going to put myself in this camp. We have an opportunity to bridge the gap. We have an opportunity to lead the way forward and to, bring Democrats with us who want to return to more classic liberal values, to make room for the socialists that George Orwell spoke about, the ones who were for justice and liberty, the ones who were for equal application of rules to all people. The socialists or the Democrats, the liberals, the classic liberals who are for free speech and free association and who are open to experimentation with new ideas, and not some pre-planned vision of the anointed that's going to be crammed down on the the majority of the population because we know what's good for them and we're the enlightened people and we're hyper intellectual, and so we just need to make all the decisions about what's moral and about what's right. I think we need to have a dialogue. We need to be able to have a productive dialogue, and that means that Republicans can't be sore winners. They also have to maintain their own accountability, and they have to just continue to propose a vision that is enticing to the majority of the American people, and they also have to live up to that vision. So I just want to leave you guys with a few quotes. One from George Orwell: "Though seldom giving much evidence of affection for the exploited, he is perfectly capable of displaying hatred, a sort of queer, theoretical, in vacuo hatred against the exploiters." He's saying that in reference to intellectual, hyper-intellectual, book-trained socialists. And then this is just a quote from Martin Luther King. This is kind of tying back to my comments on identity politics. "The good neighbor looks beyond the external accidents and discerns those inner qualities that make all men human and therefore brothers." So I think we have a great opportunity ahead of us. It's up to us to make the most of it. So thank you all for listening. I'll see you in the next video.